Okay, I already started on OBS, so I'll start on Skype too.
Okay, perfect.
Where the fuck's the button? Oh, here we go.
Every time.
There we go.
Every time that button eludes us. Welcome to Glitch Cube, and once again we're here with myself, Christian, and we got here with me, Chris.
Yep, that's
How's
me.
How's it going? How you doing?
Oh, I'm chilling.
Yeah. All right. So today we're going over something that's kind of blowing up lately, right? It's fairly new concept to gaming, and it's one of those that I feel eludes a lot of people, and it can be confusing in a sense if you don't really know what you're looking at. And that is the concept of idle games or clicker games, right? And with those, what that really means is it's a game with very minimalistic mechanics, like a point and click kind of game, but the ultimate goal is to lower the amount of interaction the player has with the game in order to continue progression. And there really is no end goal to these, right? So, like, when it comes to clicker, what experience do you have with clicker games?
Ravaging addiction. Let's see. For me, like, I'll get started on a lot of them now. Nowadays, I don't really even mess with them anymore. But like, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, it was kind of when they were booming, right? It was the new hip genre that everyone was like going crazy about, and there were like a venture capitalist was one where like I played the hell out of it. Like it was always sitting there in the background, just constantly going, and I like prestiged a bunch of times. But a lot of like these clicker games, they don't really have an end. You always have to prestige. There's never really a way to fully complete one.
Well, that's kind of the goal of it, right? Yeah. There is no end game. There is no complete. It's just keep playing no matter what, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, to me, that's like a modern day slot machine. And I think that's maybe why I'm not completely drawn to these games. I've played them, and don't get me wrong, like I've always ended up having one downloaded on my phone, which I can say without a doubt that pretty much everybody has at least one idle or clicker game downloaded on their phone right now. Just because they're so popular, right? And they're so easy to get into. It's such a simple mechanic. But when it starts popping up all those ads and the clicks of like, here, buy this, that'll go faster. Yep. That's whenever I start getting kind of taken out of it a little bit, because it feels like I'm just gambling at that point.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, I played a lot of I think it's like the Bitcoin millionaire or whatever, billionaire.
Oh, the adventure. Oh, yeah. The Bitcoin capitalist or whatever.
Something like that. That one, I don't know. I got stupidly into that one. I never paid any money for it, but it was during a time where I worked at a job where there was a lot of free time and a lot of time where I could just kind of goof off. And I'd always have that on. If I wasn't doing anything, I'd had that running right next to me on the desk. And I realize with these idle games, clicker games, there's a pattern in them that I love. And this stems back from early Congregate, Newgrounds. I loved games that had upgrade features, right? You spend a little bit, you get an upgrade, you see a difference happening either through numbers or visuals or something like that. These games, that's all it was about. You're just upgrading, you're seeing bigger numbers, and that's why initially I was so into like Cookie Clicker, because you would see visually like your upgrades either through the objects or numbers, and I was in love with it. I'm like, oh my God, there's so many upgrades. This is fun. I want to keep getting it. You know, it's interesting because I don't really feel this way in a regular type game for like on a console or other PC games. It's always been like Flash games. I've loved the upgrade systems. And when you have a game basically built around it, I was won over. And I definitely can say that all of them, I think Cookie Clicker was probably the one that I got deep into. And I feel like a lot of other people did too, because it was like on, like, I think not Forbes, but it was like a one news article. I remember like even the mainstream
I think
media,
it was, that one was actually in Forbes as well. Yeah.
Which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, and it was made It was made by one developer, and it was done overnight as just kind of like a little project. And it's still played today. It's still immensely popular.
Oh yeah,
but I think the main draw really of these clicker games, or these idle games, or however you want to call them, is when you look at the psychology of gaming, right? The main thing that game designers want to focus on is that reward system, right? It's the ebb and flow of a game. It's how you balance them. Like, if you take a game like, let's say, Shadow of the Colossus, right? It's not an idle game whatsoever, but it's an interesting study when it comes into, when you look at ebb and flow and the reward system. You have these long lulls in time in which you're traveling to the next Colossus to battle them. And then once you get to them, you have this big climactic event. And then once you defeat it, it goes back to a long lull, right? And that was on purpose. So when that was designed, the idea was to have the player's heart rate increase when facing off on a Colossus. And then the long lulls in time gave the player enough time to reach a resting heart rate. And then right whenever they're about to interact with the next Colossus. So it creates these really high peaks and valleys for the player to interact with. So when you look at clicker games, they're interesting because it's just a constant high. You're always getting rewarded. You're seeing those numbers increase at an alarming rate, and you don't have to do a lot to accomplish this, right? So it draws in people who aren't really like hardcore gamers in a sense. I don't like that term personally, but right, it's a silly term in my opinion. And the idea of a hardcore gamer it sounds like, I always equate that to toxic gaming in a sense. So you're not someone who's familiar with games, right? So it'll draw in people who don't know much about games, and it's a good intro to them to get them excited, right? So I think that's the main draw of the clicker games, but which is the same thing as the main draw of gambling or whatever it may be, or the gachapon machines, is that you're at that constant high always. And then but you can only handle that for so long. And I think that's where idle games are so clever in a sense, right? Where you can only hit that peak for so long before you're exhausted of playing these games. Yeah. Well, guess what? Now the game will play on its own, because within a quick period of time, you can get things automated. Yep. And then that will just continue the progress with you even whenever you're not using the app. So that's what's interesting about them, is that you create those peaks and valleys. So when you're done and you've hit your limit, you're able to step away from the game. And then when you come back, it's still progressing in the background. So you get all of the boosts and the boons when you return to play.
Yeah, it's when I definitely agree with how it's the constant reward system. And with like slot machines and gambling, there's kind of the fear of losing, right? But with these games, it's a little bit beyond that, right? Because you're not going these games, you can't lose, right? It's basically impossible. And
there is no lose, right?
Yeah,
there's no game over.
It's all win, and every time you click, you're rewarded. Anytime, right. As long as you have the program open, you're rewarded and you're winning. So it's like you were saying, you could keep playing it until you get burnt out. And that's why a lot of these have like a prestige system. So it's where after spending so much time playing them, having the autoplay go on because you get bored of it, there's like a whole new game added with some of these where it's like totally different, and then it brings you back in. And I feel over the years they really evolved into what they were initially. Like, you look at Progress Quest or Anti-Idol, it's basically just like an RPG menu, right?
Yeah.
And you're building your little characters, and it just automatically does the story for you.
Those ones have even less involvement than what's currently now.
Exactly. Like, they literally were just press the button, let it start, and then it just automatically plays a game for you. Nowadays, you have games where, like, say, Idle Champions or the Forgotten Realms, and there's a bunch of games like this as well, where you actually build a little team of characters and you let them just run through stages idly, and you get items to build them up, and if you click on it, they kill the enemies faster, so the stages go quicker. And these games are slowly becoming just automated. I don't want to say stories, because I mean, it's not like they're deep stories, you know?
No.
But they have the potential. You look at what they've become in the past few years, and that they're able to create these dungeon crawlers just from like idle gameplay. What's stopping people at some point from creating I don't want to say triple A, let's go with double A game that will automatically play for you with very little input? And I feel in time, especially with how busy adult lives are, granted it would be more like a movie almost, but it'd be an interactive movie. But games could become that, you know, where these idle games could have a crazy story and you could watch it unfold. I mean, that could be the future of them. Be kind of cool.
Well, yeah, it would be interesting to see. I mean, we're kind of seeing that now, like, especially like the games, like there's a lot of RPGs and dungeon crawlers that are immensely popular in China that have full auto battle incorporated into it. And that's becoming more and more popular with the use of like emulators and different ports from older systems to things like iOS that have like speed up functions and all that, where, as you mentioned, we have less and less time as we're growing up, right?
Yeah.
We have more responsibilities, but we still want to play, and having these auto battle functions allow us to still hit on those rewards, right? To get those high peaks and that winning mentality.
Yeah.
While not fully actively playing the game, in a sense. Like you said, you're watching it unfold in front of you, and that's just becoming more and more of the norm. But what I find really strange, I guess, in a sense, is that like these games have a very weird beginning, right? Like they were almost made as a joke.
Yeah.
Right? Like Cow Clicker. How immensely popular Cow Clicker was, right? A Facebook game.
Yeah.
And it's still played today, which I think is ridiculous because there's no cows in Cow Clicker anymore. It's just empty spots.
Yeah.
Which is insane that people are still playing this game.
The cow explosion.
Yeah. But it's the fact that it was originally made as a commentary on how silly these games are. But it's interesting to see that that's actually the direction in which games were going. So what started out as a joke is now actually the norm. So it's, I don't know, it's almost like they were taking a peek into the future when designing these games. And maybe it was the idea of us like making a joke out of it that made it much more popular to begin with.
I think so. They started coming about in a time where like memes were around, but memes weren't like a big thing, right? So you couldn't really call these meme games back then, but considering
they're compulsion games.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's the same thing as like how many times do you check, your Facebook? I mean, I don't have one, but you see people on Facebook all the time.
Yeah.
Or checking their Twitter feed or checking their Instagram or whatever it may be. And it's that same concept where all you have to do is open the app. Here you go. Here's some instant gratification. And then you're good. You can close the app again.
Mm-hmm. It's what it feels like. And as someone who doesn't really go on social media too much anymore, I see it around me. Like people are always like kind of gravitating towards it. And it definitely, like, these games feel like that. And it's weird. It's a weird connection. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a trippy one, and I am very curious to see where it goes in the future, because this is definitely going to be a genre that's going to be around permanently.
Oh yeah,
because of how immensely popular it is, and just to see like how many different genre types are now being like changed over into an idle game.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have shooters, we have RPGs, we have dungeon crawlers, we have like farming simulators. It's all there. Like we can turn any kind of game into that.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I guess if you really look at it, old point and click games were idle games before idle games.
I mean, I look at that like that, where old Facebook games, right? Farmville, anything where you had to wait for something to finish. I don't know. I remember with Farmville, you had to click on something and it's like, wait 10 hours and then you'll get your item.
Yeah.
Granted, that's a little extreme and they're more considered social games, I guess, but I feel like those kind of were idle games as well, because...
Well, look at Forager, right?
Yeah.
Forager is an interactive idle game, in a sense. And I know those two terminologies definitely contradict one another. Mm-hmm. That's for sure. But it's the same idea where you perform a very small task, right? You're just clicking on a resource to gather it, and then you automate your systems.
Yeah.
And eventually you can just sit back and just let it go, which is exactly what like Adventure Capitalist, right? You start out by buying lemons, and then you can buy newspapers and keep going down the line. But then you can buy managers which will automate that process for you, so you no longer even have to click anymore. And it's the same thing with Forager. Even I would say stuff like Minecraft now, with a lot of the mods are going in that direction too, where you can automate everything.
Yeah.
Like with the Sky Factory stuff, which is fascinating, and it's really cool to see what people are creating. There is a lot of work and setup to the automation, but eventually you can just step back and you get all the resources you can ever ask for without having to mine anything anymore.
That is kind of crazy. I mean, I look at Forager, it's a step in a different direction with idle games, because it is very interactive. I mean, you can make it an idle game by just building a bunch of stuff to do things automatically for you, or you could just play it like a regular game to an extent, right?
Right.
And with the updates they've done to it, it's added a lot to the game, and it's really crazy what that game became after it first came out, really. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed my time with it a lot.
Yeah, it's a fun game. I mean,
there's definitely kind of an end to it, and I got to it. I haven't really played since the major updates or anything, but
yeah, there's a nuclear craft now, right?
Yeah, there's that, and there's I think there's a few other things as well. I haven't. Mm-hmm. I remember seeing that there was supposedly 4 updates after I played it, but
oh wow, yeah, I'll have to check it out again. Because it is entertaining.
It is, and it made idling fun, and that's something that is kind of rare, because I feel a lot of times idle games, you're just playing it because you're excited to see the numbers. You're not actually playing it. And I know I started playing this other game called Swag and Sorcery, which it's kind of a town builder, resource management, and idling, right? So you're in control of a little town, right? And the idling comes from just letting it sit there, it gains money, and then you send your party out idly to attack enemies, beauty contests, stuff like that. And basically it's like a town builder, which I'm a sucker for. So it's interesting to seeing that a lot of town builders are kind of taking that idle route as well.
Yeah. I mean, you can argue that like SimCity and all that were idle games to begin with. It just, they were under the guise of simulation games, but really it was just you setting up a city and watching things unfold in front of you. So, I mean, I would argue that like maybe, what I think is going on with idle games, and I think the natural evolution of them is this new idea of automation games.
Yeah.
And I think that's the next progressive step. It was getting people used to and excited about the idea of setting something up and watch it progress in front of them. And now that people enjoy these games and maybe some of them want a little bit more involvement in them, now we have a surplus of automation games that are coming out. Like, what was that other one? Satisfactory, right?
Oh, yeah.
That one, I would almost argue that is an action-adventure idle game, in a sense. Because there are certain threats, so that, like, that's what draws me to some of those games like Forager, and that is that there are actual threats in the game. You can die, you can lose resources and all that stuff, but it still is a simple game in which you can just collect and gather and keep that high of that win state in your mind for prolonged periods of time.
Yeah, I think like with that game and Forager, it's more like a resource management sim, and then they've combined a lot of like idle ideas as well. And I think a lot of games are starting to do that, where they realize people like upgrades and collecting over time. While you're busy building things, running around, there's things in the background building up. And I'm noticing a lot more games incorporate that as well. That way it feels like there's always something being done in the background and you don't have to grind as much anymore. I feel that a lot of developers are using this as a way to make it easier for people that have less time to play to fully enjoy and experience everything. And I know you were talking about Time Warpers the other day, and I was like checking that out, and it's really interesting because I thought you could run around in it, but I guess it just automatically runs for you, but you aim and shoot?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just it's literally just shooting or idle shooting game. So you don't really have to do anything. It just does it for you, which is kind of a trip.
Yeah. It's crazy. And like it looks good too.
Yeah.
We hope that you like what you're hearing so far. And if you have any interesting ideas that you would like us to talk about, or any kind of subjects that might be interesting, please let us know on our Discord. Message us on Twitter or even Instagram, whichever media works for you. If you'd like to get a hold of us, our Twitter handle is The Glitch Cube. Links for our Discord are going to be below the page. If not, you can always find us through Twitter as well.
So to kind of go on that, like the weird mashups, right? What do you think would be an interesting mashup of an idle game that you haven't seen yet?
I would love to say a sport game because that'd be really interesting to see that. But I mean, you could I feel like
sport manager.
Yeah, because I'd be like, well, I guess the thing with clicker like idle games is that it borders on simulation a lot. So, I would have said shooter, but Time Warper seems like they've got it really figured out too. An RPG's been done.
How about like a detective game? Can we make a detective idle game? Like, what would that look like?
You could make it where over time, like, scenes of the murder, like, kind of develop, right? If you, like, advance your skills, like, you can make it where your character will be able to, after you upgrade him enough from doing trivial cases, he could feel like a ghostly presence that tells him that someone was murdered here, or his like vision will see things. That'd be really interesting, though. That
could be fun, right? Like, so let's say Private Eye the game, right? Private Eye clicker. So you open it up and maybe certain cases get dropped to you and you have to solve those cases by collecting resources, collecting evidence, and things like that. And then you can recruit new people to your Private Eye agency. And maybe one of them could be a spiritual medium. And that way you can then like even talk to the victim, right? If you visit their area.
Yeah.
But like you would have to gather enough resources to like actually use them. Maybe you're not actually hiring these people, but they're more like freelanced. So you have to get things in order to hire them in order to solve different cases, and then you can solve them in a different order.
Ooh.
That could be kind of interesting. That sounds fun, actually.
That would be kind of cool.
I'd play that. I like that because it feels more interactive, so it's not just so linear. It's just like, here you go, here's a bunch of money, yay, right? Like maybe you have a docket of cases, and you can solve them in any which way you want to, but it's up to you how you want to solve them and who you want to hire at that given time to solve that, right? And maybe you have to do some petty things like, oh, lost cat. And then you go do the lost cat ones, and maybe you solve like 50 lost cats to get $1,000, which then allows you to hire like a photographer, right? And then you can send the photographer out to solve a case on like, oh, I need to find out like, oh, my husband's cheating on me. I need to go. I need information on that, right?
Yeah.
So then you hire the photographer to go then do that.
That's actually really good.
It could be fun. I mean, I'm trying to think of what's the next steps for idle games, because there are a lot out there, and it's a very simple mechanic, so you can't go too far with it before it becomes something else, right? And it does need to have that sense of full automation where you can step away and come back to it. So it could even be like, maybe you hire a receptionist and that receptionist takes calls. And when you're not using the app, that's when you solve these simple crimes that come in from day to day. But then the big ones on your docket, those you actually have to go in and manage your resources and move them to the right places to solve these crimes.
Yeah. I mean, it'd be cool if these games created a system that you could lose, right? So say if you're doing one of these cases and you don't have enough resource of this one thing, you're going to fail the case, which means, okay, you lose a bunch of resources, you got to start over, your reputation is down, and you got to rebuild it again. And it'd be cool.
I think that's what's missing for me with these games, is that risk.
Yeah, there's
no risk.
There isn't. And I feel like that would be a really interesting addition, because almost any idle game I've played, you could buy like either really expensive ones and still be fine, right? Like upgrades. The only thing is you won't be making as much as quick as other ones, right? There's never a way to mess it up. Like you'll always be rewarded. And I think if people challenge this to where there could be consequences to your actions of some sort, it would make them really interesting and different. It also might make a lot of people dislike it because it's something like unlike the others, but I think it'd be really fun to play. I mean,
there is always the risk of losing people, right? Whenever you add in an end or like a lose game situation. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's not like a full lose game. Like you can never lose your agency in a sense. And by solving these cases, you just gain new resources, maybe gain new reputation, and it makes certain things cheaper to hire.
Yeah.
But you never lose the ability to hire. Right. So like that would probably alleviate some of the risk reward system and make it so that people don't feel like, well, now I've messed up way too much and I can't do anything anymore. I have to start over. And prestiging in there, like prestiging is an interesting concept. You mentioned it earlier. Like, do you want to explain what prestiging actually is?
So say you've gotten every upgrade that there is. You have like hundreds of them. You're making like quintillion dollars, or like say like a venture capitalist, right? You're making like zane billion, whatever the hell they're zillion.
Right.
Things.
It's like teragillion or whatever it was.
Something stupid. Ridiculous. Yeah. And there's nothing left for you, right? Well, with prestiging, you'll start back at 0, and all your upgrades will be gone, but you'll start off with a lot more money in the beginning, and there's usually added bonuses. Mm-hmm. And the way they get you with prestiging is that when you first start a game, there's a lot of upgrades you'll never be able to get because the amount you have to spend on them are so high that you have to prestige, because each time you prestige, you'll get a multiplier to your numbers. And I think with Adventure Capitalist, I had to prestige maybe 5 or 6 times in order to really be able to afford most of the end game stuff. Mm-hmm. And
end game in quotes.
Yeah, in quotes. Yeah. It's basically the last upgrades. And they do this so it keeps you there, right? Because you could idle it the whole time. I bet if I went to my Adventure Capitalist right now, I haven't played it in years. The passive,
you have so much money.
The passive part of it could probably buy the end stuff. And that's kind of the funny thing is these clickers, like, if you started them a long time ago, they're still they're still going. Like all this time advance, like you'll have a lot, basically. But you have to prestige in these games in order to get like later upgrades. And it's all it does. Like, yeah, it sucks having to start over again, but you basically collect everything faster. You're replaying the same part over and over again in order to reach the higher upgrades.
Mm-hmm. And prestiging is an interesting concept to me because it's more... When I think prestige, I think more complicated gameplay, like with Call of Duty or something like that. Something for a little bit more of a...
More skill involved.
More skill set involved with it. So bringing in those concepts to a game for essentially non-gamers in a way, it helps further introduce them into the gaming community and getting them used to the lingo itself, so that this is like a good gateway into games, because you're going to start learning these terms like grinding, prestige, and all that. Yeah. Because in a sense, there is grinding. It's you clicking a crap ton of times to gather resources. The same thing you would do in any RPG is you sit there and you grind up your levels to get whatever you need, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a new sword in a town and you can't afford it yet, so you walk around in circles to get the 5,000 gold to get it. Well, that's grinding. Well, if you need a new manager to help automate that new system you got in Adventure Capitalist, you might have to do some grinding before you can fully automate it and then step away from the app and let it do its thing.
Yep.
So learning these new lingos and getting people more and more involved in the idea of you're playing a game will help introduce them to more complicated concepts, which then allows the genre itself to evolve into something new. So, like, going back to the detective game that we were just talking about, our fake game, if you prestige, maybe, like, let's say you move to a new town, and that new town now has new art assets and new quests and new cases for you to solve, but you're starting a new company there. But you can still bring in like some of your connections and stuff from the other towns.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that could be like prestige. You don't have the full reputation up yet. You're at zero money because you're starting a new one, and you have to gain your reputation back up and get your resources again. But you do have access to some of the resources from your other towns.
Right.
You just don't have the money to get them just yet. Right. I think that could be something interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I look at prestiging as a new game plus, kind of. You're starting over. You have mentally all the knowledge of what you just achieved to get there that you can take into a new game. And there's always a benefit with New Game Plus most of the time. I know there's some out there where there's like really no benefit aside from a difficulty increase, but most of the time you're getting boosts to random things, or you're keeping your items, right?
Right.
I feel that, like you said, it's a good terminology to get people, like non-gamers, into, where they're like, oh, like there's something after we like what seems like an ending. I mean, most games nowadays have that feature, or a lot of games do.
Yeah. New Game Plus is not a new concept for people.
Not at all.
At all. Like in some RPGs, you can carry over your job classes, but not your levels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you just start over, or maybe even you get your equipment, but you don't have the same levels, or you have your levels, but not the equipment, right? It just depends on what the developer wants to throw in there.
Yeah.
But it adds in that extra challenge of maybe the first playthrough, you couldn't do something because you didn't have the right equipment, but then you go back and you're able to revisit these things. Like, I mean, even games like Pokemon have aspects of that, right? Where you gain the cut ability, and then you're like, oh yeah, remember on Route like 12, there's that tree that I can cut down, and then you just get like a Master Ball real quick, or whatever it may be. But it's the idea of going back after you gain a different boon. So with the idle games, it's the same concept where you continue forward, you get a lot of abilities and resources, you learn the game, and then you start over, but you are able to start over at a faster rate.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, what's your ultimate takeaway of idle games? Are you a fan? Do you not like them as much? Do you get fully immersed in them? Like, what's your average playtime of an idle game?
I feel like it's a phase for me. I haven't played one in a while. I've actually been thinking of just having one running on the side, because it is kind of fun just to see it advance and unfold on the side while I'm doing something else.
Yeah.
But it's not something that I'm not crazy about them. I have a friend who will play when a new one is released on Steam. Like, he'll check it out, he'll play it, and he'll leave his review on which one it is, but he'll always go back to his main one. And there was a time where I was like that too. I was trying out each one to see if I liked it, and I played them for a little while and just stopped because I get bored of it. I want to play a game with a story. I can have these running in the background, but ultimately, what is it really doing for me? You know, and that's kind of my takeaway from them. They're fun to spend maybe an hour on, get your like serotonin boost from seeing all the numbers go up, your excitement, and then it's like, okay, this was fun. Now let's do something more meaningful, you know?
Yeah.
But They're fun. I might check one out just to have a little fun for an hour and then be done with it. If more idle games go towards simulation style games, then I might become more interested. I'm already starting to see that happen with some games, but until there's more innovation in the genre, I think it's just something that's there, and it's a good little time waster. I guess for casual games, it's probably the one I would pick over a lot of other kind of games.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Like
I feel
Candy
like we're
Crush
kind
or
of on the
something.
same spot. Yeah, I can't. I played Candy Crush for a while, but I just can't anymore. It's just, but I feel like it's the same thing with the idle games. You can only play them for so long before you're just kind of done with them, in a sense. But I wonder if that's kind of a result of our upbringing with games. We were brought up with games with story, with meaning, where you had a purpose from the get-go. Like you walk in, like Final Fantasy V, you come in the first hour, the wind crystal breaks, and now you're a warrior of light. And then the story unfolds in front of you. You have to save the world, right? And there's an ultimate end goal. But with these idle games, there is no end goal. There is no real, like, save the world from the big bad. It's just continue forward. And I say that very broadly. There are some RPG games coming out. I can't remember the name of one of them, but you are literally fighting monsters, and you can get party members, and your party members can die, but you just let them kind of freely roam around on the little map area and fight these creatures. And I feel like that's a step in the right direction for maybe our generation, but with how everything is automated and how quickly we get our information, and just with, like, we see it with TikToks and Twitter and Facebook, and just how fast everything is, and we want that instant, like, right now, give me my information, give me what I want.
Yeah.
Like, that's not our generation. That's this next generation. That's Gen Z, right? And these games are popular because of the Gen Zers. Like, they want that, like, okay, I've checked my Twitter, I've checked my Facebook, I'm good. And then now it's like, oh, might as well just open up Adventure Capitalist real quick. Hey, check it out. I got some money. And now we go back and continue the loop.
Yeah.
And that's a loop that I've never really been into or excited about. Like, when I play a game, I want story. I want depth. And unfortunately, these idle games just don't have them. I can see the appeal. They are fun. They are entertaining but only for a short amount of time, for me at least. Like, I play them, and maybe I'll play them for like a week, and then I'm good. Like, I get it. So
yeah, you can only brag about your progress bars and your numbers so much on the developers Discord, and then you get bored of it. It's like,
yeah. And is it really something to brag about? Because, like you said, I guarantee if you went on Adventure Capitalist right now, you would have so much money. You'd probably be like super high on the leaderboard, but you didn't do anything.
Exactly.
Like, there is no skill involved. And like, maybe to get a little deep with it, like, it feels like we're catering to this idea of, like, the participation award, right? And I've never agreed with that. Like, saying, like, oh, good job, good game, right, at the end of a match or whatever it may be, that was your participation award. And the goal was to win, to better yourself, to learn from the experience.
Yeah.
And there's no learning from this. And, like, just getting handed stuff, like, that's not fun, in my opinion. I don't know. I like working for what I have, and I work very hard at what I get. And I see a lot of kids now, like, that in our workplace, the younger generation, and I'm not trying to bash on the youngers, right? It's a different mindset, and I get it. That's totally fine. It's just, there's so many people nowadays that it seems like they feel entitled to what they have. And it seems like games are kind of gearing towards that. It's like, oh, well, you downloaded it, so you should get everything. It's like, no, that's not how we remember games.
Yeah, they give you a chance to buy
everything,
everything too,
Yeah. And so I don't know. I feel like we might have just missed it by a few years to be really like deeply involved in these games. But I can see the draw. I get it, but it's not for me. So.
I'm just more interested in what they bring to other genres. Like, we see the auto fights in RPGs and how over the years it's kind of advanced. And I feel like at times, like, some of these idle games kind of maybe influenced some of those other, like, RPGs, like how you can have a better battle system that seems more, I don't know, like smarter than the AI, because sometimes in the older games that like when they were first doing the auto battles, I would never use them because you would get wrecked. And then I play Dragon Quest 11, have the autoplay on for most of the game, and I did just fine. No one ever really died. I was like, wow, this is actually smart. Like, it's weird.
So for that one, how did the autoplay functionality work out? Like, was it the AI healed and did things based on the battle?
With the Dragon Quest series in general, I forget when it started. I think maybe 4. But you have an auto setting, right? And you can have it where one member is auto, you can have them all as auto, and you can, different presets, right? There's, I think, 6 different ones, including the follow your orders, but they have it where don't use MP, so it'd be all physical attacks. You could have it where one focuses on healing, one focuses on hard hitting moves. So it's like go all out. So they'll be doing like their most expensive magic spells, or they're like, usually it seems like it goes for the spells more than the physical attacks if they have magic spells, but they've always been pretty good in the Dragon Warrior games. Like, I played through 4 through 6 recently, and after a while of grinding, like, I'll just put on auto. And I mean, it's older AI, so they're going to burn through their magic power like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But still, like, it was smart. Like, they knew what they were doing. They would attack ones that needed to be attacked. Otherwise, they would waste a turn. And I was like, okay, like, it's smart. It's cool seeing the evolution of autoplay. And it makes me interested to see what will happen in the future with this, either through even smarter battles or creating a game that'll auto play for you. Like, say you have to grind 3 levels in order to beat a boss. Like, can I just leave the game idle for a little while so it grinds and then come back to it? I gained my 2 levels. I'm ready now, and I didn't have to sit there physically and do it. I think that might be the future, but I also feel
I could see that.
Playing a lot of modern RPGs, I'm noticing that they're making the scaling a lot better. Back in the day, you would randomly get thrown a boss that was maybe 5 levels higher than you.
The up ramp in difficulty was ridiculous.
Yeah, and you would have to spend like sometimes 2 hours or more just trying to gain levels, and it'd be, even if they had automated battles once they started, it would still take a while. And I feel that the future is just to have auto battles. And I look at a lot of ports of older games, like when I was playing through the Trails in the Sky, you have it where you have a fast forward button, and you can use that during the battles and outside, so everything just goes quicker. So if you have auto fight on plus the fast forward, your battles are done instantly.
Right.
Why can't this feature just be incorporated for grinding? Be like set to gain 3 levels. You leave for a little bit, get something to eat, come back. Boom, you gain 3 levels. Like, I feel like that is where we're headed from this.
I think that's interesting. The only thing I'm worried about with that is, once again, the risk to the system. because RPGs, you have to have that risk, right?
True.
So what, like the system, like Final Fantasy V, the updated system for the port to the iOS, has an auto battle functionality in it, right? But what it is it remembers the last move that character did, and it just redoes that over and over and over again until you exactly. So that one's a little trickier, and it did help in certain areas where, like, let's say you just want to grind a bunch of levels out. So you're just walking around circles, and you already know everyone's weaknesses. You know how to handle the random encounters because there's only X amount of like formations that you can encounter in a given area.
Yeah.
So that system did work out, but you needed to at least battle 1 or 2 times without the auto battle functionality to find the right combination before you can turn it on. And I feel like that worked out pretty well. The thing that I just, like, I want to see the evolution of it, and I do like the idea, because we don't have a lot of time to play these games anymore, and sitting there and grinding out levels to get certain spells and whatnot seems like such a daunting task at this point. It would be cool to see it, like, set it to stop after gaining 5 levels, or whatever goal you want to set in mind.
Right.
But where does that stop? Like, can I just start the game, say, stop at level 99, and then just come back tomorrow, and then my character's at level 99?
Well, I think...
And I'm at the very beginning of the game.
I think, well, you have to remember that you're going to be scaling much higher, so they could incorporate where the enemies will give you 1 experience. There's... God, I forgot the RPG. I played it recently that... Once you reach a certain level in the area, you only start getting 1 experience from the enemies. So you're kind of forced to progress, right?
Ooh, I like that.
They take away grinding, right? Because, we can go even further back with Terra Enigma. When in that game, if you're even under 1 level of a boss, you're doing like half damage of what you could be doing.
Oh, wow.
So instead of doing 40 damage, you're doing like 18. You say you're down 2 levels, you're only doing 10 damage. And then, God forbid, you're even lower, you're doing like 1 damage.
Yikes. Okay.
So you gotta grind in that game. And I mean, honestly, as long as you play the game normally, you don't have to grind. There's 1 boss you have to grind, and it's annoying because you really have to grind like 5 levels or 6 levels. Like, it's bad. But with that game, when you're in an area for a while and you want to, like, over level, it comes a point where each enemy like gives you 1 experience, and you can't really do anything anymore there, because you're going to be needing like 300, 400 experience. You don't want to sit there just hitting the same enemy like 500 times.
Yeah.
So if games incorporated that auto battle system, but made it where after a certain level you gain minimal experience, it would force the player to progress. And I think that for this feature, it would bring in a whole crowd of people that wouldn't play these games normally. There's a lot of people that hate turn-based games, right? They prefer action RPGs. They prefer games that are faster paced. They don't like sitting down. If you made this feature where it would automatically grind and they would still progress, they'd be able to experience this amazing story that they otherwise would be turned off about. And still enjoy this RPG. I mean, they'd still have to do actions and choices. It would just take away the thing they hate the most. I think it'd be a cool option.
Yeah. What if it was like Final Fantasy VIII, that system? And I know that like system. That. Well, not the draw per se, but the fact that the enemies scale with you.
Yeah.
So that increases the risk of overgrinding, and that will help like limit people from going too crazy with it. Like, sure, there might be spells and abilities that you want, but you have to weigh the risks of now having the enemies be really OP because you decided to try and be as strong as possible. And I wonder if that like would be a good because I guess I'm just trying to find a deterrent as to why would you want to over level, right? Like, or why set up the auto grind functionality. But I guess that kind of breaks that system, because then what's the point of the automation of it if now the enemies are just automating with you as well?
Yeah, because I mean, if they level with you, then that takes away the whole minimal experience you gain. So then you could literally just start first thing in the game and get to level 99, you know?
Or what if we take a page out of Pokemon? If you over level a Pokemon and you don't have the right gym badge, then there's a chance of them not listening to you.
Yeah. I mean, there is that.
So,
it's, I guess, like what I was thinking with the being forced to progress because you're not gaining any experience anymore, it makes you equal with the enemies. And I mean, there's still a lot of challenges. They would just have to make the bosses harder, right?
yeah.
So, say you had it grind to level 20. You can't grind in that spot anymore because you have to beat the boss to go to the next area. You're going to fight the boss that, I mean, you can make the boss level 22, right?
Right.
But
So there's always that extra challenge. Yeah.
There's a challenge still there, but it makes it where you can't be too powerful. You have to basically rely on skills and debuffs and all of that. Like, there's a lot of ways to make this system work. I just feel that it's kind of a complex thing that a lot of people don't want to worry about, so they just keep it traditional with that kind of stuff. But I think
they're afraid of the risk, I guess. As a developer.
And I think it could work. You know, it'd be an added system. Like, you could still play the game normally, but it'd be a nice feature for people that are busy. I mean, you look at RPGs that are popular nowadays and they're like 20 hours or under. Like, no one really has time for these 60, 80 hour long games because 30 hours of it were leveling. That's it.
Yeah,
you know?
That's true. So I like that, actually. That could be a cool new innovation to these idle games where you allow the player to grind through the random encounters or just the general battles. But when it comes to the boss battle, you have to fight the boss. Like, that's how you progress the game. You fight the boss, you gain your story, you learn a little bit more about the world you're in, and you're making progress. And then when you get to the next level, you can just grind through the random encounters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could work.
I think that'd be kind of cool. Yeah. Like, even if it's just like there's that, was it Walking Quest? Where it's an RPG, but you're like, you just see the characters walking on the screen, right? Like, maybe going from town to town, it's them walking, and as they're walking, they can encounter a bunch of enemies, and you can say, like, how long do you want them to take on this trip? And based on that, that's how many encounters they will face, thus gaining them X amount of levels before you get to the next area.
No, it sounds interesting too. Yeah.
But I mean, when it comes to idle games, it's a growing market. It's still around. I mean, it's fairly new-ish, I guess you can say. I mean, they've been around since 2002. So, I mean, how new can you really say they are? But we're seeing new and different innovations coming out of this field as people try and gain more players to the gaming community. And I am excited to see what the next steps are. And like we said, every time a new game comes out or a new idle game comes out, I always check it out. I try it out for a little bit. And some of them have been catching my attention for longer and longer. But when it comes down to it, I still end up dropping off after a while.
Yeah.
So I think they're moving in the right direction to try and gain more a wider audience still.
I think so too.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us tonight. We hope that you liked what you heard. And if you want to join in the discussions with us, you can follow us you can chat with us on our Discord channel. The links are going to be below. Or you can follow us on Twitter at The Glitch Cube, where we'll keep you up to date on episodes to come and all that fun stuff. But once again, thank you for listening.